So I now have the privilege of turning the stage over to our keynote speaker, Judith Faulkner. Founded Epic Systems in Madison, Wisconsin in her basement in 1979. Today, this company is the nation's leading medical software company covering more than 250 million patient lives. The company also employs 10,000 people in the Madison area and is one of its leading employers. The success of Epic, I think, captures many of the themes that we've discussed here this morning. Entrepreneurship, innovation, the value of university partnerships, and the shared success that can flow when a company is deeply engaged with its community. This story is one of the reasons why the Brookings Institution has singled out Madison as one possible candidate to be among the nation's next growth centers. Ms. Faulkner.
Gotta set my watch. All right, so I'm here to talk about what it's like to start up a company from nothing. And I'll start with some background. When I went to school, I loved math. I had some really good math teachers, so I think at heart I'm a mathematician. And my undergraduate major was math. And in my junior year, I went to the University of Rochester, where I was supposed to have a summer program sponsored by the NSF in aerosol physics, which I knew nothing about. I was supposed to work in that role. And when I got there, they expected me to do programming. Well, I had never seen a computer. I told them that. And so they handed me a Fortran book and gave me 1 week of access. At the end of the week, they said I was a really good programmer. And at the end of the summer, we wrote 2 papers. Then I went back to school and applied for graduate school. I applied to several different places, and then my husband and I had to choose, do we go to Boston, Harvard? Do we go to Wisconsin, UW? Do we go to California, Stanford? And we thought about it and decided we wanted to go to Wisconsin. They were all good schools, but we liked the idea that Wisconsin was in the Midwest, that it was a place where we'd probably be able to have trees and see animals, and it felt like a good place. Well, when we drove there, we found it was a city. And yet, and indeed, there's so much of it that is really good as a company when you start up. And I'll get into that a little bit later. When I went to school there, I got to say, just back up a minute, that both Stanford and Wisconsin did something I didn't expect. I applied for graduate school in mathematics, and those two switched me on their own to computer science. I thought, that's wonderful. That's just playing games. That would be so much fun. So I was really glad that it was computer science. And I took probably the world's first class ever in computers and medicine. The person who taught it, Warner Slack, asked me to work with him and his team, and I said, okay. And I had a bunch of different projects, like calculate call schedules for the doctors and things like that. And then one day I was brought in, and they said that they needed a system. They were trying to solve a problem, which I think is so much about what we're talking about with creativity. They need a system that would allow them to keep track of patient clinical information. Well, back then there were systems keeping track of labs, and there were systems for billing, but there really wasn't anything broadly available that we knew of at all for clinical. And they wanted to be able to define their own data elements and design their own screens. Well, that made real good sense, because if you're going to do clinical, everybody's clinical is a little bit different. But there was no Oracle or Sybase or DBase, and we didn't know the words database management system. So pretty much had to invent that with the help of a little system we saw at the Beth Israel. So I went away for about a year and wrote Chronicles, the underlying infrastructure, and you can tell that there's a sense of time in its name. And came back with it and started putting it in different places at the university because different departments asked me to please set them up with a system. They wanted to keep track of the clinical information of their patients in their specialty. Well, I would start getting calls from the people that I had worked with as they went around the United States and showed people what they were doing. They showed their peers. They wrote papers, and they'd call me up and say, "Judy, start a company." I would laugh. That happened for about 2 years, and I kept saying no. I didn't see myself as running a company. But eventually I said, I think the last week before I said yes, I had 4 calls, start a company. So I said yes, had no idea what to do. Went and saw somebody who had spun off a lab company from the university, and he said 3 things. 1, get a good lawyer. 2, get a good accountant. 3, get permission from the university. So obvious, but I hadn't known any of them, so I went and did all those 3 things. Then I did something that only maybe 15 years later did I find out that both the accountant and the lawyer thought that I shouldn't have done it, at the time at least. But it was really a good thing. I went back to my customers at the university and asked them, who would like to be part of the company? And for that, keep your day job and work weekends, evenings. Sometimes you might have to take a day off. And for that, you could buy stock. Well, they all said yes. And we valued the entire company at $70,000. So if you bought 10% of Epic, you paid $7,000, and they got good returns. We started after about 2 years of preparation in the basement of an apartment house. And we had 2 rooms, 1.5 people. I was paid half-time, had a morning assistant and an afternoon assistant. And next to us was American Girl Dolls, except it was known as Subject Index at the time, and it turned into American Girl Dolls. So 2 real beginning startup companies in that one incubator basement.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.